Hello everyone, welcome to Straight Talks F1. Finally, the Chinese GP weekend has happened. For 5 years, F1 was putting it on the calendar year in, year out, and it used to get cancelled. In 2024, by God's grace, by luck, somehow they have managed to pull it off. And there were doubts about it could have been chaotic. They had the sprint race format. Given they had not raced at that track for 5 years, so people were asking questions whether it was right to go back to that track and right away have the sprint race format over there. But eventually it worked out well. In fact, it added to the jeopardy because they just had one practice session. So there was a lot of excitement with the sprint qualifying, then the sprint race, and then the Grand Prix qualifying happening on Saturday afternoon. And people expected Red Bull to dominate at this track. Historically, they have had success at this track. Their first race win came at this track all the way back in 2009, and they sort of gave a revisit to that race weekend 15 years ago. A century of poles at this race weekend. Verstappen getting Red Bull's 100th pole position in the Grand Prix qualifying. And it sort of gave Red Bull fans a nostalgic ride all the way back to 2009, where Red Bull got their first 1-2, their first race win with Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber. And then there was McLaren, who pulled off the perfect bluff. Before coming into China, they were like, we're going to struggle over here, there are low speed corners. Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, Andrea Stella, everyone saying the same thing. And they come here, they take the sprint race pole, and then they get a podium, a P2 finish for Norris. I mean, way to bluff, McLaren. Hats off. That's how one can sandbag via words. Build all the narrative up, under-promise everyone, and over-deliver in the race weekend itself. But Fernando Alonso did not bluff in China. He was at his vintage best. Fernando Alonso turning back the clock as if we are in 2010. The elbows out race start, an odd strategy, a 3-stopper, getting his elbows out in the sprint race, which did not work out well for him. He got a 10-second penalty, 3 penalty points on his super license. Despite that, he was at his vintage best in the Grand Prix. It's insane to think he's 42 years old and he signed a 2-year contract at least, which takes him till the end of 2026, and he's gonna race till he's 45, and he's not showing a single sign of losing form. So that's something I'll discuss in detail later. But yeah, diving deep into the first big story was of course Red Bull's century of poles, and overall it was another dominating weekend, so not much to talk about, but certainly another statement by Max Verstappen. Now, to look at it bluntly, Max Verstappen started the Chinese GP weekend on an iffy note. He did not look like he's going to blow everyone apart given the way he was going in sprint qualifying. In the first 2 sessions, he was there or thereabouts but did not show his hand. And when rain came down in SQ3, everyone expected he's just going to blow everyone apart, take pole by 1 second or so. But that did not happen. He made 2 crucial mistakes, and 2 mistakes in a wet qualifying by Max Verstappen. That is unheard of. Don't know what was the reason, what happened, but he did make mistakes. Everyone was going off in that session. Lando Norris had his lap deleted 3 or 4 times. And in fact, he took his pole by 1.2 seconds. Now, there was the controversy around Lando Norris's pole lap getting reinstated. Whole lot of chaos going on. His lap got deleted, then it got reinstated. There was confusion with the track limits violation. It is always track specific, like in Austria. If a driver breaches track limits on the last corner, then his next lap also gets deleted. That wasn't the case in Shanghai. So the next lap, which Lando Norris had set, was his fastest lap that got him pole position for the sprint race. It was fine, it did not have any track limits violation. That was the reason they reinstated it. But from Verstappen's perspective, he made mistakes, he ended up P4. and then it was sort of a statement drive in the sprint race. He won the race by over 10 seconds, 10 to 13 seconds in the sprint race, over a 19 lap race distance. That was Max Verstappen telling everybody, alright, I've arrived in China, now you can fight for P2. And from there on, Verstappen did not look back, taking pole by a considerable margin. The battle for the front row was quite exciting than the battle for pole. Everybody, Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, everyone had their shot at taking P2. Eventually Sergio Perez pipped everyone, and that showed the dominance of that Red Bull when it came to low fuel, all out qualifying on the soft tires in dry conditions. Nobody could match that RB20. But it was quite fun to watch that Q3 shootout, and eventually it was Verstappen's glory. Red Bull completing a century of pole positions at the same track where they got their first pole position 15 years ago. They couldn't have asked for a better script than that. At the same track where they got their first pole, their first win, and eventually they won the race. A top class drive from Verstappen. If it could have been a 1-2, that could have been a perfect ode to 2009. 15 years later, at the same venue where they got their maiden win, with a 1-2 finish with Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber, and now Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. A full circle of Red Bull's victories in F1. Could have been a notable point in Red Bull's history, but it still is. They won't mind it if it wasn't a 1-2. Sergio Perez would have been disappointed not to take that P2, Lando Norris beating him to it. But overall, it was a very good race weekend for Red Bull as usual. Perhaps they'll get used to it now. They've had 4 of these race weekends now, with 19 more to come. So wonder how many such perfect race weekends would Red Bull have this year. Now McLaren and Lando Norris, such liars, absolute bluff masters. They built up all the narrative around the low speed corner weaknesses. Shanghai has low speed corners, they will struggle at that track. And then they forgot that it also has long straights, it has medium speed corners, which plays well to the strength of that McLaren car. So no wonder when the weekend started, they were going great since the sprint quali. Both Norris and Piastri were there in the fight for the top 5, consistently putting in good lap times. And when the rain came down in SQ3, Norris showed his class in the wet. Thankfully, he pitted for inters at the right time. Because Sochi 2021. After pitting for intermediate tires, he showed his class in the wet. Fantastic qualifying. 1.261 seconds. Who takes pole position by such a margin these days? It's insane. It had to be a wet qualifying and it provided so much entertainment. And Lando Norris was just on it. Purple sector after purple sector. Someone should give him a race winning car. McLaren needs to give him a race winning car. We need to see Lando Norris fight Max Verstappen in equal machinery, because in the same qualifying Verstappen was making mistakes and Norris was just acing it, purple sector after purple sector. It was insane to watch it. And overall that session as a whole, rainy conditions, it was a pure show of talent in the wet weather. Norris, Hamilton, Alonso, Verstappen. If anyone is asked about who are the 4 best wet weather drivers, best drivers to drive in rainy conditions, it will be these 4. There is Stroll, there is Ocon, Gasly, Tsunoda. These guys have the ability to do well in wet weather, but not as good as Norris, Hamilton, Alonso and Verstappen. They showed they are a class apart when the heavens open up. So Norris would have been happy after Friday. But then his sprint race just unraveled in the worst way possible. It could have been a top 3 finish. And Hamilton himself said that Norris could have easily parked it behind him and then tried to overtake him in the next few corners. But he just hung around the outside and went off track, and his race just got undone from there. That opening section of corners in Shanghai is a snaily one. It comes back on itself. Turn 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it opens up into 5 and 6. It is an interesting set of corners always. There will be some battle going on there, and a driver can cleverly use the switching lines. The outside line for one corner becomes the inside line for the next one. Norris could have used that very cleverly, and that could have earned him an easy top 3 in the sprint race. He was there or thereabouts with Verstappen and Hamilton. Perhaps even faster than Hamilton, who knows, because that Mercedes struggled throughout the weekend. Except for SQ3 where he somehow pulled it out, put it on the front row. Hamilton was nowhere near the top. So a missed opportunity then the sprint race for Norris, but eventually he made it up in the Grand Prix. Perfect race, best he could have done. Pulled off the one stopper, beat Sergio Perez to take P2, splitting the Red Bulls. There's not much he could have asked for. Obviously they knew something. McLaren knew that they would be good at this track. Perhaps they did not want to blow their own trumpet. It was unfortunate that Oscar Piastri ended up where he did, not in the top 5, got damaged due to the crash between Ricciardo and Stroll. But yeah, McLaren still got the podium with Norris. So promising signs for them. They have got upgrades coming in Miami and Imola. After China, where Norris was matching and beating Sergio Perez's lap times, that could be quite interesting to see how much of a step up can they take up with those upgrades. Last time around, last season, when they got upgrades, it was a huge step forward. Could it be a similar sort of step forward? We never know, but they'll certainly do something. Andre Stella has said that they're expecting to fighting for race wins towards the end of this year. So there has to be something there in that McLaren. And who knows, Norris may break his duck of race wins. His record is getting extended. 15 podiums now without a race win. So he needs to get that monkey off his back sooner than later. Given the way McLaren is progressing right now, it has to be this year. So fingers crossed for McLaren and Norris, and hope they stop bluffing. Now, Fernando Alonso, an absolute vintage performance in China. That man is a mystery. He's not aging. He's not dropping form at all. He's aging backwards. He's driving like he's in his 20s. His results may not reflect it. A P7 finish in the sprint race. He had the penalty, he had the crash and the puncture. In fact, the Aston Martin was quick on qualifying, so he put it to P3 in both qualifyings. But the kind of race weekend he's had, it was vintage Fernando Alonso. What he used to do about 10 years back, and he's still in his heyday. He's still driving like he's in his heyday. It is amazing to watch. There's something about people born in the July of 1981. There's a cricketer called MS Dhoni who's playing like he's 22, and there is Fernando Alonso who's driving in F1 like he's 22. But yeah, an absolute vintage weekend. The sprint race was quite unlucky. Talking about it, I would say the penalty is quite debatable. It was hard racing from him against Sainz. There was Leclerc and Perez also in that battle. He was the one ahead in P3, and obviously his tires were degrading. Sainz was on the attack, and he gave a hard and tough fight. Yes, there can be a debate whether he should have gone for that lunge, but was that lunge in the middle sector so dangerous that he had to get a 10-second time penalty and 3 penalty points on his super license? That's something nobody could be able to decode. The logic behind it, only the FIA knows, only the race control knows. But keeping that sprint race aside, as I said earlier, in both the qualifyings, getting it into the top 3, and then that elbows out race start, that was classic Alonso. Right out of the blocks, he was aggressive, elbows out, getting P2 ahead of Sergio Perez. He knew he was going to lose it eventually. He knows the Red Bull has got the pace to overtake him, but still, to go for it, to take P2, if he had the chance, he could have also gotten Verstappen. But obviously, Verstappen is not going to yield so easily, only if Alonso had a faster car. But yeah, quite the nostalgic ride from Fernando Alonso this weekend. That's insane to think about. It's been 11 years since Fernando Alonso has won a race. It's been 17 years since he won a championship. 17-18 years without a championship. And the man is still driving at his level best. And it's unreal to think that he's only a 2-time champion. The moment that he had in the race behind Lewis Hamilton to save that kind of an iffy moment where he dips a wheel in the gravel and his car could have spun around and crashed anywhere on the pit straight. On the other side of the pit wall, could have taken Hamilton along with him. Anything could have happened, and he saves that moment, counter steers, opposite lock. Those kind of reflexes at the age of 42. Fernando Alonso is an alien, absolute alien. That could have ended both of their races. He was pursuing Hamilton to get past him on those new medium tires. And again, coming back to that strategy, they did not have enough tires, so they had to switch to that soft medium strategy for the second part of that race. But it gave us good action. He put on a show of overtakes, dropped down to P12 or 13, and then came back overtake after overtake. And that's when he had that moment behind Hamilton to save that kind of a moment and keep going and overtake Hamilton in the next few corners. That's something only Fernando Alonso could do, perhaps. We've seen Verstappen do that often, spinning in Hungary 2 years ago and still winning the race. Hamilton has saved such moments often. But yeah, that's the reason Fernando Alonso's name is taken in the same breath as Hamilton and Verstappen. The unreal part is that he's going to drive till he's 45 with his new Aston Martin contract, a multi-year deal. God knows how long after that, after 2026, who knows. But he needs to be studied. There is something there. Perhaps in his mind he just thinks that he's in his 20s. In 2015 he had a crash in testing, an accident, after which they did not reveal what happened, but there was a conspiracy theory that he lost his memory. When he woke up from that crash, he woke up in the year 1995 or 97. So there was this alleged memory loss theory, and clearly he has got his memory back now. It's been 9 years since that accident. But who knows, maybe his subconscious brain thinks that he's still in his 20s. In 1995, he would have been 14 years old. So 14 plus 9, 23. Which means Fernando Alonso is going to race for 20 more years. But yeah, jokes apart, that is just a wild conspiracy theory. Fernando Alonso was just absolutely sensational. A vintage Alonso in China. Hats off. Absolute hats off to the Spaniard. Now the big controversy, the big crash of the Chinese GP. Lance Stroll versus Daniel Ricciardo. Sir Lancelot, as he's called in meme culture, poking the honey badger. Well, he poked a bit too much. Because that is not the way to save his seat. Now, of course, he's got a rolling contract. Lawrence Stroll, his father, owns the team, so his seat is almost guaranteed. But before this weekend, he gave an interview and he was like, time will tell. when Will Buxton asked him about what his future holds in the sport. So that was quite interesting from Lance that he's not sure about continuing in F1, which is something many fans would advocate that he should leave F1. And given the way this crash happened in China, perhaps he should look at going to NASCAR, a quite NASCAR-like crash. And such crashes have happened in F1, but it still felt odd. And under safety car conditions, it wasn't as if he was racing him for position, trying to overtake him and went into the back of him. Like he gave Ricciardo a taste of his own medicine when Ricciardo did the same to Verstappen in Baku in 2018. But again, that was in racing conditions. This was under safety car conditions. So that is something that has baffled people, and even Ricciardo for that matter, and it has pissed him off to quite an extent because Lance Stroll has blamed Ricciardo for that incident, saying that Ricciardo braked a little too much that caused him to crash into the back of him. And hearing this, Daniel Ricciardo was absolutely fuming. And he's not a person, despite being an Australian, he's not a person who vents out his anger so publicly. He keeps his emotions to himself. Even after the worst of incidents, he'll try to, keep a smile, not really express his emotions, express any anger towards the other driver. He'll go and sort it out with that driver or with his teammate, however it is. But this time, perhaps Stroll really pushed his buttons. And from Lance Stroll's perspective, it just does not make sense because he's underperforming quite badly to Fernando Alonso. Yes, he may not match Fernando, but at the same time, Fernando is taking that car to P3. He's trying to get into the top 5, top 3 in qualifying. And there's Lance Stroll who's not able to finish in the top 10. There's Alonso who's saving his car when he's had a moment in the gravel and he's avoided crashing it anywhere. And Lance Stroll is crashing under the safety car into the back of another car in front of him. It's at a relatively lower speed under the safety car. Fernando Alonso was going at almost 150 or 200 kilometers per hour at that final corner when he had that moment. So quite the contrast between the Aston Martin drivers, and Ricciardo had to bear the brunt of it. Extensive floor damage, he had to retire from the race, and then an interesting set of events happened after the race. He had got a penalty because he overtook Nico Hülkenberg on the subsequent lap because Hülkenberg had overtaken him during that crash, but Hülkenberg was permitted to do so because Ricciardo slowed down because of the crash, and Ricciardo breached the safety car regulations when he overtook him on the next safety car period. So this gave Ricciardo a 10-second penalty, but because he could not serve it in the race, that 10-second penalty has become a 3-place grid penalty for the Miami GP. Just when Ricciardo had some hope in this weekend, he was doing well, he was going good, he had a decent qualifying, the sprint race, it was looking good for Ricciardo. And even in the race, he was trying to fight for the points. And then this crash just undoes all his good work, and he comes out empty-handed again through no fault of his own. Stroll obviously got his penalty in the race, he served that penalty. So Ricciardo must feel hard done by because he's already DNF'd from the race. He cannot serve that penalty, and obviously he was in breach of the safety car regulations. So it's a fair penalty, but the cause of that overtake that made him breach the safety car regulations, he did not have any fault in that. It was Stroll who crashed into him, and he's going to have a 3-place grid drop for Miami. But that sport at times, it's cruel. When you're down and out, things can get even worse. So yeah, hopefully Ricciardo carries on his form and keeps these setbacks behind him and gets back to form again. And hopefully Lance Stroll doesn't crash into the wall or someone else. Now sparks flew at Ferrari. It did not look like it would happen. The way Ferrari has been going this year, quite lofty standards, have been on the podium every race. They got a win in Australia, 1-2 rather. So morale's been quite high. And then they come to China and then the pace is relatively under par. McLaren obviously downplayed themselves and over-delivered. At the same time, Ferrari were expecting to be on the podium, perhaps try to close the gap to Red Bull, and it just did not happen for them. They had to take a back seat. And amidst all this, Sainz and Leclerc had their tussles going on. Now there's this narrative about Sainz leaving the team obviously, and that could unravel their relationship. Sainz and Leclerc could turn on each other. I mean, the Spaniard is driving for his future next year, so he's basically driving for himself. And if Leclerc gets in his way, obviously he's not going to yield a single inch. But at the same time, they got to stitch together a partnership that has worked well for the past 3 years. And even if they have had these hard racing moments, they have got past them quite easily. So to even look at that moment where they had the battle with Alonso and Perez in the sprint race, and then as Perez got through, Alonso dropped back, and Sainz pushed Leclerc off the track at the hairpin, at the exit of the hairpin. It is quite subjective to say how severe was that contact. It wasn't anywhere close. That battle was not anywhere close to Monza last year, and given they got through that, Vassar had a sit down with them. They talked it out and united together as a team again. So given they got through that, a battle that could have had a double DNF at Ferrari's home race, I feel they can get through this too. It wasn't as severe as Monza. Yes, they had a moment on the first lap of the Grand Prix too, but is it going to trigger a civil war at Ferrari or something? I don't think so. They'll sort it out. Frederick Vasseur has really got things under control in terms of the team dynamics, the operations. They are much more sorted now. They're planning towards the future. Things are going in the right direction. So Sainz leaving should be a smooth exit for him. And even Leclerc would not want to unravel this relationship in the last year of their togetherness. This is their last season together. Next year Hamilton will come in. Leclerc has to build a new bond with him. Given how successful this partnership has been between the two, Leclerc would want to end it on a good note. Even Sainz would want to end it on a good note. And Vasseur definitely would not want these two to step on each other's toes, given how they have got upgrades coming at Imola in a couple of races time. Miami is supposed to be a race people are saying Ferrari could be good at. They could match Red Bull, maybe beat Red Bull. Monaco is obviously always a track that could be close. Ferrari can get pole. They can keep Red Bull behind. So there are chances for wins again. Australia was perhaps lucky. It was on pace obviously. Red Bull had their issues. Ferrari were reliable, so you have to be reliable. You have to finish first. So knowing there is chance for wins if the upgrades work out, Vasseur would not want Leclerc and Sainz to step on each other's toes. Absolutely not. He will have that sit down again with both of them and sort things out. Perhaps give a stern lecture. But yeah, I think things will be alright at Ferrari. Now a thought for the home hero in China. In Shanghai, his hometown, Zhou Guanyu. Finally, the man gets to race in his home country. After 5 years, F1 returns to China, and Zhou Guanyu is fortunately there to race. It's a dream come true. And the way the race weekend panned out from a performance perspective too, he would be quite happy. Yes, Sauber did not score any points, but they were there. Both Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, they were there in the sprint qualifying. Both qualified into SQ3, got into the top 10. Bottas even got into the top 10 for the Grand Prix. Unfortunately, he got the engine failure and could not score points. But overall, Sauber would be happy, and Zhou Guanyu especially, because the applause, the environment. It's such a grand setting there in Shanghai. The Shanghai International Circuit, it's always been this huge venue. The pit building, the grandstands, it's a different vibe in Shanghai. A classic metropolitan city circuit. And for Zhou to take the checkered flag at his home race, he of course finished P14, far from points. But still, come on the pit straight, he had a special tribute for him, a special Parc Fermé board with his face on it. So that must have been quite unreal to see and quite wholesome. And then just to hear the applause that the crowd gave him, 25-30,000 people in the grandstand cheering his name, applauding for him. He's just finished P14. He hasn't even scored points, let alone being in the top 5 or anything. But that was the environment, the grand setting of it. No wonder he got emotional, almost on his knees. He must have had tears. The only Chinese driver in F1, and come what may, whatever his future holds in F1, but to have that appearance, to finish the race, to have a complete race weekend where he's the man of the moment, under the spotlight, cherishing that home crowd applause. I think Zhou will cherish those memories for a long time, even if he doesn't achieve anything of note in F1 later on. And yeah, overall, that was the Chinese GP. All the narratives, all the storylines that unfolded. Coming back to a purpose-built track like China that came all the way back in 2004, it was built for good racing. Quite extreme with hard braking zones, long straights, but it provides good racing. Even if it's like a template like Herman Tilke circuit that many criticize it for, and quite similar to Malaysia, still because the track characteristics are such that it provides good action, it's always fun to watch a Chinese GP. And yeah, this weekend perhaps proved it that everyone was missing China on the calendar and they were glad to be back. Irrespective of all the criticism drivers would have had with the sprint race format and everything, eventually they got on well. So that was really cool to see. So now that China is back, perhaps F1 should try to bring back Malaysia and Turkey. That could be fun. Turkey we haven't raced since 21. Malaysia, the last Malaysian Grand Prix happened in 2017. Been 7 years. But yeah, up next is a track, Miami, which is a very lame one. I hope there is some sort of good action in Miami. Hopefully with McLaren bringing upgrades in Miami. Let's see if Ferrari brings anything. If they can be actually good in Miami and match Red Bull, as people are talking about. So yeah, those are some things to watch out for the Miami GP. But that's all from my end on the Chinese GP review. So arigato and stay tuned until next time.